our previous lecture we had talked about Mahatma Gandhi's thought, both his religious as well as political thought. We had discussed the sources or the sources of inspiration behind his thought, as well as the actual philosophy. Sources क्या थे religious thought के? The Bhagavad Gita, Hindu religious scriptures, Islamic religious scriptures, the Bible and Jain philosophy, along with the actions of his parents, especially his mother. Philosophy में 3 core pillars थे, क्या क्या? That truth and God cannot be separated, that the spirit or soul of a religion is more important than its form or body, and that different religions are simply different paths to reach the same destination. As for his political thought, sources ranged from various international liberal philosophers and authors such as John Ruskin, H.D. Thoreau and Leo Tolstoy to his own experiments, and the philosophy included elements such as Satyagraha, which was his own version of mass civil disobedience, mass struggle, as well as his philosophy as well as strategy of mass struggle. The idea of trusteeship, which was based on a recipe of class cooperation rather than class conflict. The ideas of Sarvodaya and Antyodaya, which were his philosophical standards for inclusive development, and the idea of Swaraj, which was not simply a political phenomena but would translate it into actual independence for the masses. Right? These things we have already covered. Next we have to talk about Mahatma Gandhi's 3 early Satyagrahas in India. Right? These include the Champaran Satyagraha, in 1917. It represented the first Gandhian act of civil disobedience in India. The Ahmedabad mill strike in early 1918, which represented the first Gandhian act of hunger strike while in India, and the Kheda Satyagraha. Also in 1918, which represented the first Gandhian act of non-cooperation in India. Now, these were not all India mass movements. They were localized Gandhian Satyagrahas. Unlike the all India mass movements of the next phase, these were based on specific regional issues. And in one sense, they have been interpreted as Gandhi's experimentation of the Satyagraha strategy at a smaller scale before they could be implemented on a more grand theater, on an ampler theater. Okay. Now, after coming back to India on the 9th of January 1915, he had been advised by his political mentor Gopal Krishna Gokhale not to directly jump into Indian politics. Rather, Gokhale asked him to travel across the entire country. Mahatma Gandhi had already proven himself in South Africa, and he was seen as somewhat of a miraculous figure by the Indian masses, right? So the nationalist leadership had great hopes for him. Gandhi had also demonstrated his ability to connect deeply with the innermost thinkings and aspirations of the masses. And this was the real strength of Gandhi in South Africa. In order to replicate that kind of success, Gandhi would also have to develop the same kind of link with the Indian masses. So he would have to gain first-hand experience of India and Indians, living conditions of Indians, the way in which they think, the trials and tribulations that they undergo in daily life, what were their hopes and fears, what makes them click. ये सब गांधी जी को समझना important था in the eyes of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and that is why he was asked to travel across the entire country. Now, Gandhi ji responded to this advice and actually began traveling across the country. During the Home Rule movement, while Mahatma Gandhi attended some meetings, he never participated directly. ठीक है, कुछ मीटिंग्स उन्होंने अटेंड करी. फॉर एग्जांपल ही अटेंडेड अ मीटिंग एट दिल्ली, अटेंडेड मीटिंग एट बॉम्बे, लेकिन कभी भी डायरेक्टली पार्टिसिपेट नहीं किया. ही नेवर एड्रेस्ड द मासेस, ही नेवर रोट एनी articles in support of Swaraj and Home Rule. He never worked to generate mass awareness for the idea of Swaraj. So even during the Home Rule movement, he took a hands-off approach. And it was during one of his journeys that he was approached by a farmer from Champaran in Bihar. Now, that farmer, Rajkumar Shukla, asked Mahatma Gandhi to visit Champaran in order to solve the problems being faced by the peasants over there. क्या प्रॉब्लम्स फेस कर रहे थे चंपारण में फार्मर्स? They were being forced to cultivate indigo by the British planters. You remember we had talked about the indigo rebellion of 1860 in Bengal. तो एंड में हुआ क्या था? The indigo planters of Bengal had simply packed their bags and moved slightly towards the west. बिहार में जाकर के सेटल हो गए थे एंड वहां पे प्लांटेशन को रिवाइव कर दिया था. The same exploitative practices, forced cultivation that farmers of Bengal were facing before this, now the farmers of Bengal were being forced to bear it. By this point of time, indigo plantation was becoming less profitable. Why? Primarily due to the decline of natural indigo as a result of the invention of synthetic dyes, synthetic color by German scientists, German chemists. German chemists had developed synthetic dyes. Now, while the profit margins were declining, the indigo planters, British planters, were not ready to absorb the losses. Rather, they were shifting the losses onto the Indian farmers. Either they were enhancing the rent that the farmers were paying to them because they were also the local landowners, or they were asking for monetary compensation to dissolve the contracts that they had forced the indigo planters, indigo farmers to sign, right? Further, indigo plantation के अपने कुछ और भी negative fallouts होते हैं. It degrades the soil, it lowers the water table, it disrupts the labor market, it destroys the local ecology, and it also edges out the food crops. So it also results in the shortage of food crops, leading to food inflation, food shortages, and even can cause famine. ठीक है? तो इंडिगो प्लांटेशन इनके लिए सबसे बड़ा इशू था. एंड प्रॉब्लम ये था दैट इंडियन फार्मर्स वर नॉट डूइंग इट आउट ऑफ देयर ओन फ्री विल, rather they were being forced to do so by British planters who were strong arming them into signing contracts which were against their interests with the backing of the local government. Okay? Now, Mahatma Gandhi was still traveling, so he was not very interested in actually going to Champaran. तो अहमदाबाद से कलकत्ता जा रहे थे, and upon reaching Calcutta he saw a newspaper headline that Champaran DM ने बोला है Gandhi cannot enter Champaran, and this for him was almost like a challenge, right? That I am an Indian citizen with the freedom of movement across the country. Who is the DM of Champaran to prohibit me from coming over there? That is why he decided to finally go. Now, in the first stage, Gandhi ji instructed other leaders who had accompanied him to learn about the truth at the ground level. धरातल पे सच क्या है उसको समझने के लिए दैट वाज द फर्स्ट स्टेज ऑफ सत्याग्रह, टू सर्च फॉर द ट्रूथ. He instructed the other leaders who had accompanied him to go on a truth finding mission. These leaders included personalities such as Dr. Rajendra Prasad, M.A. Ansari, Mazharul Haq, Narhari Parekh, Gulabhai Desai, and Acharya J.B. Kriplani. Over the next few days and weeks, these leaders traveled across Champaran, met with the farmers, learnt about the situation at the ground level, and collected facts and reported back to Mahatma Gandhi. Once Mahatma Gandhi was convinced that the problem of the indigo farmers of Champaran was valid and it needed recourse, then he began the next stage of his satyagraha. तो एक बार सच पता लग जाए तो उसका साथ नहीं छोड़ना है. To insist upon the truth, make God as witness and having no fear of consequences, to change the heart and mind of the opponent through self-suffering. So in the second stage, Gandhi advised the farmers to violate their contracts and stop cultivating indigo completely. ठीक है? Why had he done this? What was the moral justification behind this? That forced cultivation is in itself unjust and is a violation of the free will of individual farmers, and by continuing to cultivate indigo in this forced manner, the farmers are also participating, even if unwillingly, in their own oppression. So they are also on the side of injustice, they are also on the side of lies. And since Satyagraha is supposed to be a struggle for the truth, so forced cultivation को end करना ही truth का साथ होगा. That is the real struggle for God. Secondly, on a strategic level, it was also supposed to pressurize the planters and the local authorities to spring into action, कि जल्दी से कोई ना कोई solution निकालने पे मजबूर किया जाए. ठीक है? And why do you think this was going to work? Because the British could not in earnest, the British courts could not in earnest uphold the validity of these contracts and the actions of the planters and the local authorities without violating the basic concepts of English jurisprudence. English jurisprudence में जो contracts होते हैं, they are freely entered by both parties. और slight superficial investigation भी ये reveal कर देता that these were not free contracts, these were forced contracts. So the British were pushed on the back foot over here. In the meanwhile, Mahatma Gandhi also provided a way out for the British. He demanded that an inquiry commission should be established, and at the same time he began using the media in order to popularize this issue, right? This was a phenomena that was hidden in a remote corner of Bihar, जहाँ पे न्यूज़ जर्नलिस्ट इनका रीच बहुत मिनिमल था. The entry of Mahatma Gandhi on the scene had ultimately exposed it and sensationalized the issue, and therefore simultaneously Gandhi ji also used the print media to popularize the issue, attracting sympathy across the country for the farmers and anger against the local authorities and the British planters, right? Thus, the local authorities came under intense pressure, and finally, a Indigo Inquiry Commission set up bhi kar diya gaya, of which Mahatma Gandhi himself was made one of the members. The Indigo Inquiry Commission then published its findings after a brief period of investigation. क्या findings थी इनकी इंक्वायरी कमीशन की? जो सच था that these were forced contracts. Recommendation में क्या बोला? That no farmer should be forced to cultivate any crop against his wishes, and thus it invalidated all the contracts that the planters were holding over the heads of the indigo farmers. Okay? So it was a clear victory for the farmers of Champaran. Why is it considered to be the first Gandhian act of independence? Sorry, first Gandhian act of civil disobedience? Because it involved the willful violation of legal contracts. Civil disobedience होता है willful breaking of unjust laws, ठीक है, in a civil manner, in a non-violent manner. This also had that element. Thus, it is known as the first Gandhian act of civil disobedience. Give the heading: Gandhi's 3 early Satyagrahas in India. Gandhi's 3 early Satyagrahas in India. इंट्रोडक्शन लिखो. Write down. Upon returning to India, comma, Gandhi ji had been advised by his political mentor Gopal Krishna Gokhale to travel extensively instead of directly jumping into Indian politics. Next point. Over the next 2 years, comma, Gandhi followed this advice comma, traveling to every corner of the country, traveling to every corner of the country. Of the country. Full stop. Even during the Home Rule movement, even during the Home Rule movement, comma, while he attended some meetings, while he attended some meetings, he never participated directly. He never participated directly in any political activity. Any political activity. Okay. Next point. His direct contact with Indians from diverse regions and backgrounds gave him an innate ability, INNATE, an innate ability to connect with the masses, comma, later allowing him to emerge as a true mass leader, to emerge as a true mass leader. Next point. Mahatma Gandhi was finally prepared to test his strategy of non-violent satyagraha against British rule in India. Against British rule in India. Full stop. Over 1917-18, comma, he launched three regional satyagrahas upon specific regional issues. Full stop. They could be considered as mini experiments, of his strategy before they could be replicated at a grander stage. These include 1, 2 and 3. Champaran Satyagraha, Number 2, Ahmedabad mill strike. Number 3, Kheda Satyagraha. Kheda Satyagraha. सब हेडिंग लिखो. Number 1, Champaran Satyagraha 1917. Champaran Satyagraha within brackets 1917. Hyphen, first civil disobedience. First civil disobedience. के अंदर एक और सब हेडिंग दो, issues. Issues. Write down. The indigo farmers of Champaran wanted freedom from forced indigo cultivation under the तीन कठिया system. Under the तीन कठिया system. The word तीन कठिया comes from the words तीन, that is 3, and कठिया जिसमें से काट ही लिया. Now, one of the units of agricultural land measurement used in North India is बीघा. एक बीघे में कितने बिस्वास होते हैं? 20 बिस्वास. Biswas are also known as काठीज. ठीक है. So it involved the cultivation of indigo in 3 काठीज out of a total of 20 काठीज. So total land में से at least 3/20 of the land में the indigo farmers were being cultivate indigo. Next point लिखो. Under this system, comma, indigo farmers were legally forced to cultivate indigo on 3/20 of their land. On 3/20 of their land. Through legal contracts. Enforced upon them by British planters with the help of the local authorities, and courts. Full stop. सब पॉइंट लिखो. 3/20 फ्रैक्शन वाला 3/20 ऑफ देयर. सब पॉइंट लिखो. Since indigo cultivation is highly capital intensive, comma, the contracts provided for the arrangement of loans for the farmers by the planters. By the planters. Loans for the farmers by the planters. Full stop. In return, they would have to supply a fixed quantity of indigo to the planters. To the planters. Indigo to the planters. Okay? However, the farmers wanted freedom from this system because of its various limitations. Point likho. In point. The farmers wanted freedom from the Teen Kathia system due to the following problems. The following problems. Sub points 1, 2, 3, 4 करके. Number 1. Indigo cultivation had become unprofitable. Due to rising competition from synthetic German dyes. And the planters were shifting their losses onto the farmers. By increasing their indigo demands. ठीक है. So if a commodity becomes less valuable, तो आपको ज़्यादा बेचना पड़ेगा in order to recover your investment. So that is why this is how they were shifting the losses onto the farmers. Number 2, it was also leading to the problem of rural indebtedness. The farmer found that he was never in a position to actually repay the loans that he was getting. So कर्जा बढ़ते जा रहा था and interest was also accruing, and now he was being forced to accept even more illegitimate demands by the indigo planters. कि अब कर्जदार हैं तो कुछ भी करने के लिए आपको जो कर्जा दे रहा है फोर्स कर सकता है. राइट. Number 3, indigo cultivation also led to a shortage of food crops. By diverting valuable agricultural land away from it. Number 4, it was also harmful for soil fertility, was also harmful for soil fertility, comma, reducing the productivity of agriculture, reducing the productivity of agriculture. Number 5, it also caused ecological imbalances, ecological imbalances due to its water intensive and polluting nature, water intensive and polluting nature. Next, it also disrupted the labor market, the labor market, due to its high labor intensity, due to its high labor intensity. Next main point लिखो, high labor intensity. Next main point, write down. The European planters wanted heavy monetary compensation, to dissolve the contracts, that the farmers were not in a position to pay, that the farmers were not in a position to pay, were not in a position to pay. क्या समझ में आया ना? इश्यूज क्लियर है? नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग लिखो, Gandhiji's response, Gandhiji's response. Write down. Gandhiji was approached by a local farmer from Champaran, a local farmer, Rajkumar Shukla, local farmer, comma, Rajkumar Shukla, to visit Champaran, Next point. Initially, he asked his other companions to lead a fact-finding mission, in Champaran. These involved, ये नाम आप लिख सकते हैं, डॉक्टर एम ए अंसारी नहीं, अनुग्रह नारायण सिन्हा, डॉक्टर राजेंद्र प्रसाद, ए एन सिन्हा, Mazharul Haq, Narhari Parekh, Gulabhai Desai, and J.B. Kriplani. Initially, he asked his other companions to lead a fact-finding mission in Champaran. These included Dr. Rajendra Prasad, N. Sinha, Mazharul Haq, Narhari Parekh, Gulabhai Desai, and J.B. Kriplani. Next point. Once he was convinced that the issues of the farmers were real, he asked them, or he advised them not to cultivate indigo. He advised them not to cultivate indigo, thus violating their contracts. सब पॉइंट लिखो. Morally, this was justified on the grounds that these forced contracts were unjust and illegitimate. Full stop. By upholding them, the farmers would be participating in injustice. ठीक है. Next sub point. Strategically, they were meant to pressurize, or sorry, it was meant to pressurize the British planters and local authorities who knew that a quick solution would have to be found. In point लिखो. Gandhi ji demanded the establishment of an inquiry commission. And simultaneously used the press to criticize the authorities and gain national sympathy for the farmers. नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग लिखो, आउटकम, आउटकम, राइट डाउन। Ultimately, an Indigo Inquiry Commission was set up with Gandhi ji as a member. With Gandhi ji as a member. Full stop. Sub point. It concluded that the contracts forcing farmers to cultivate indigo were illegal. Forcing farmers to cultivate indigo were illegal since they violated the basic principles of English law. Full stop. Next point. Next point लिखो. Next sub point. It recommended that no farmer should be forced to cultivate any crop against their wishes. And that the planters' demand for monetary compensation was invalid. Monetary compensation was invalid. ठीक है, next main point लिखो. With this, comma, Gandhi's first act of civil disobedience in India was a resounding success. ठीक है, this was the Champaran Satyagraha. Next subheading number 2, the Ahmedabad mill strike. And first hunger strike. Ahmedabad, the first hunger strike. यहाँ पे इशू क्या था? The workers were agitating in the cotton mills of the Ahmedabad Surat belt because of discontinuation of plague bonus. ठीक है, तो बैकग्राउंड थोड़ा समझ लेते हैं पहले। 1916 में 1915-16 में there was a major outbreak of the bubonic plague in Surat Ahmedabad belt. This had led to a major labor shortage for the mills of the cotton mills of Ahmedabad and Surat. However, this was a very crucial time for the mills or the industrialists of this region. क्यों? क्योंकि फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर चल रहा था and British textile production had collapsed suddenly due to the diversion of capital towards Britain's war industry and the shortage of raw materials due to German blockades of British commercial shipping. तो अमेरिका से और इंडिया से दोनों से ही कॉटन वहां पे पहुंचना बंद हो गया था. So the British textile production had completely collapsed. The global shortfall of cotton textiles was now to be made up by the newly established Gujarati textile mills, Gujarati textile industry. So it had resulted in a major wartime boom for Indian textile mills. In the absence of any foreign competition, they had completely monopolized the Indian market. ठीक है, पूरे सबकॉन्टिनेंट का मार्केट यहीं से सप्लाई हो रहा था. This had resulted in major profits and the upscaling of operations. A great degree of investment had also been done in enlarging the production capacity at Surat and Ahmedabad by almost all the mill owners. And therefore, ये labor shortage ये practically afford नहीं कर सकते, because it would have resulted in the scaling down of production. That would have been against their interest. They have lost all the money that they had newly invested in enlarging their industries. Okay? And therefore, to attract the workers to come back to the mills, over and above the salaries which were increased, they were offering a plague bonus ranging between 75 to 100% of the total you can say salary. तो इतना एक एडिशनल इंसेंटिव दे रहे थे कि वापस आइए, काम करिए, आपको इतना एक्स्ट्रा पैसा मिलेगा ओवर एंड अबव योर सैलरी. क्लियर? However, 2 years later, the situation had changed on the ground level. By 1918, the war in Europe was coming to a standstill, right? Germany had started to visibly lose the war. The Americans had also entered the fighting, and because of this, the Atlantic blockade that the Germans had been enforcing, isolating the British economy, that was lifted. British textile production began ramping up, thus increasing the competition for the Indian industrialists. And secondly, the plague and the accompanying labor shortage had also ended. There was no surplus labor present at Ahmedabad and Surat. So did it make economic sense for the mill owners to continue offering bonuses? नहीं, क्योंकि उसकी कोई जरूरत नहीं है. It would in fact derail their profit machinery. Thus, the mill owners had discontinued the plague bonuses. Are the workers going to be happy with this? नहीं, किसको अपनी जेब से पैसा जाते हुए अच्छा लगता है. So the workers started protesting. They were quite unhappy. Sporadic strikes started taking place, and at some places violence and illegal activities also started occurring. So some workers began sabotaging the machinery, breaking the machinery, which was very valuable, hard to replace, and this was leading to a big law and order problem. Mahatma Gandhi was forced to intervene. गांधी जी का रिस्पॉन्स क्या था? He met the mill workers and advised them to go on a strike, an indefinite strike, कि वापस नहीं आएंगे जब तक मांगे पूरी ना करी जाए. He himself went on a hunger strike. महात्मा गांधी का बोलना ये था that I am going on a hunger strike in order to purify my soul. तो आत्मा की शुद्धि के लिए I am going on a hunger strike. But real intention क्या था महात्मा गांधी का? See, Mahatma Gandhi was like a blockbuster star by this point of time. He was considered to be a Chamatkari Baba by the Indian press as well as the masses because of his almost miraculous achievements in South Africa and also at Champaran. तो जहां पे भी वो जाते थे बहुत बड़ा जत्था जाता था जर्नलिस्ट का. Each and every movement, action, word uttered by Mahatma Gandhi was followed very closely by the journalists or widely reported. Mahatma Gandhi going on a hunger strike was a huge public event which gained national attention. अब सारी आंखें कहां पर हैं? अहमदाबाद में. और कौन हीट फील करेगा ऐसे में? Is Mahatma Gandhi or the workers going to feel the heat? No, it is the mill owners who are going to feel. So it was a strategic decision to pressurize the mill owners. ठीक है. महात्मा गांधी जहां जाते थे वहां अकेले जाते नहीं थे. पूरा का पूरा उनके साथ एक बैंड चलता था फॉलोअर्स का, सत्याग्रहीज का. पहले से प्लानिंग होती थी. And when the journalist asked why have you gone on a strike, he said that Mahatma is trying to purify his soul and he is concerned about the issues being faced by the mill workers. उन्होंने बोला what issues? The issues were presented in the form of demands. Demands were raised on behalf of the workers by Mahatma Gandhi and his followers. क्या डिमांड्स रेज किए? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, रिवाइवल ऑफ द प्लेग बोनस. 50% बोनस डिमांड किया फॉर ऑल मिल वर्कर्स. फर्दर दे ऑल्सो डिमांडेड अ वेज हाइक. सैलरीज जो वर्कर्स को मिल रही हैं वो बहुत कम है, इनको इंक्रीज करने की जरूरत है. They also demanded improvements in working and living conditions. And they wanted the matter to be referred to an industrial tribunal which should be specially set up for resolving this dispute. तो ये सारी डिमांड्स रेज करी on behalf of the workers. Now, was Mahatma Gandhi actually serious about having all these demands fulfilled? नहीं. देखो, चंपारण और अहमदाबाद में एक बड़ा फर्क ये था कि चंपारण में जो ओपोनेंट्स थे वो अंग्रेज थे. यहाँ पे दोनों साइड, होम टीम एंड अवे टीम, इंडियंस हैं. मिल वर्कर्स आर आल्सो इंडियन, मिल ओनर्स आर आल्सो. देयरफॉर अ मिडिल पाथ वुड हैव टू बी फाउंड. लेकिन इन एनी नेगोशिएशन आपका जो पहला ऑफर होता है दैट हैज टू बी अग्रेसिव in order to pressurize the opponent. That is the starting point of the negotiation. Negotiation involves the evolution of your demands as well as the compromises that the other party is going to make, is willing to make. तो सिचुएशन ऐसा था कि अगर आपको बंदूक का लाइसेंस चाहिए तो आप तोप के लाइसेंस के लिए अप्लाई करो, कम से कम बंदूक का तो झक मार करके डीएम साइन करके दे देगा. That is actually what the strategy of Mahatma Gandhi was. कि मिल ओनर्स को प्रेशराइज करो in order to bring them to the negotiating table. Ultimately, under the sustained pressure of an ongoing strike, the public attention being brought to the situation by Mahatma Gandhi's own hunger strike and the patriotism of the mill owners themselves. वो कई ऐसे थे जो खुद ही गांधीयंस थे. They were interested about the progress of India. They came on to the outcome. क्या हुआ? Finally, an industrial dispute resolution tribunal was established which awarded $35% bonus as compared to the 50% demanded by the workers. It also laid down standards for safety and hygiene that must be observed by the mills. It also fixed minimum wages in the mills of Ahmedabad and Surat, and it fixed the maximum working hours. That any worker could be asked to work only for a maximum of 12 hours in a single day with at least 2 1-hour breaks in between. ठीक है, तो मैक्सिमम वर्किंग आवर्स को भी फिक्स कर दिया गया. Now, was this everything that the workers were demanding for? No. But what was Mahatma Gandhi's advice? To accept this award or to reject it? To accept this award. Gandhi ji called off the strike and asked workers to accept this award. महात्मा गांधी का जो फिलॉसफी है उसका कौन सा एलिमेंट यहां पे डिस्प्ले पर है? द आइडिया ऑफ ट्रस्टीशिप, क्लास कोऑपरेशन. ठीक है, so this was another grand success for the Gandhian strategy of non-violent satyagraha. Write down. ये लिख लिया है ना, हेडिंग दे दिया. अहमदाबाद मिल स्ट्राइक 1918, फर्स्ट हंगर स्ट्राइक. राइट डाउन. इशू, इशू. The mill workers were unhappy due to the discontinuation of plague bonus that had been in place since the outbreak, plague bonus that had been in place since the outbreak of bubonic plague in the outbreak of bubonic plague. In the Surat Ahmedabad belt, Surat Ahmedabad belt in 1916. Full stop. Next point लिखो. The textile mill owners had discontinued it due to A and B. A, the revival of British textile industries. Following Germany's capitulation, capitulation, following Germany's capitulation in World War I. Resulting in higher competition. B, the end of the plague and the accompanying labor shortage. Next subheading दो. Gandhiji's response. He advised the workers to to go on an indefinite strike. Go on an indefinite strike. And himself went on a hunger strike. Went on a hunger strike. To pressurize the mill owners. To pressurize the mill owners. And draw national attention to the problems of the workers. To the problems of the workers. National attention to the problems of the workers. Next point. He also outlined a more comprehensive demand program. For the workers. Including ABCD. A, 50% bonus. 50% bonus. B, wage hikes. C, better living and working conditions. And D, the establishment of an industrial disputes resolution tribunal. The establishment of an industrial disputes resolution tribunal. An industrial disputes resolution tribunal. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट सब हेडिंग लिखो. आउटकम. The mill owners ultimately agreed to set up the tribunal. Which awarded ABCD. A, 35% bonus. B, fixed working hours and wages. C, safety and hygiene protocols. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. महात्मा गांधी called off the strike and advised the workers to accept the award. Full stop. Accept the award. तो ट्रिब्यूनल का जो अवार्ड था वो एक्सेप्ट कर लें. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. This was because He wanted to strike a compromise. He wanted to strike a compromise between both sides. Between both sides. Since they involved Indian interests. They involved Indian interests. Full stop. This was an early example. This was an early example of Gandhian trusteeship. Of Gandhian trusteeship. And class cooperation. Class cooperation. Okay? So he had resolved the issue in a manner that it was satisfactory and acceptable to both parties. Next, number 3, third subheading, the Kheda Satyagraha. First, non-cooperation. Right? यहाँ पे इशू क्या था? That in the Kheda region, Kheda Gujarat में है, there had been a massive crop failure. Due to an elongated period of drought. And despite this, even though there were several famine codes in place that the authorities were supposed to observe, they continued demanding land revenue in full, even though the local farmers were not in a position to pay. So the farmers were almost in a rebellious mood and they did not want to pay revenue. They were not in a position to pay. If they paid to the government whatever little surplus they had left, then they would be forced to starve. गांधी जी का रिस्पॉन्स क्या था? Graded response था. The first stage, he sent his followers Sardar Patel and Indulal Yagnik on a fact-finding mission in Kheda. They toured across Kheda, met the farmers, learnt about their problems and collected data, right? After which they reported back to Mahatma Gandhi. Following this, Mahatma Gandhi himself visited Kheda and met with the peasants. He advised them not to cooperate with the revenue official. कि अगर लैंड्स को सर्वे करने के लिए आए तो ताला मार करके घर में बैठ जाओ, डोंट सप्लाई योर पेपर्स, डोंट सप्लाई योर लैंड रिकॉर्ड्स, रेवेन्यू कलेक्ट करने के लिए आए तो घर छोड़ के चले जाओ. इवन इफ दे कैच यू, गो टू जेल इंस्टेड ऑफ गिविंग देम अ सिंगल रुपी. राइट. गांधी जी का आइडिया क्या था? थर्ड लिखो. ही ऑल्सो asked them to prepare for a lengthy campaign of civil disobedience. सिविलाइज तरीके से लॉ ब्रेकिंग के प्रोग्राम को सस्टेन करने के लिए रेडी हो जाएं, स्ट्राइक्स ऑर्गेनाइज करने के लिए, धरनास देने के लिए, इलेजिटिमेट लॉज को वायलेट करने के लिए रेडी हो जाएं, जेल जाने के लिए रेडी हो जाएं. So this is what he advised them to. What was the morals and strategy behind this? He wanted the farmers to retain the moral high ground while exposing the British hypocrisy. कैसे? Now, famines were a recurring problem in India since the very beginning of British rule, and since the 1880s, the government had established several famine commissions to investigate the issues behind it. And in famine commissions ने अपने recommendations दिए थे, on the basis of which a comprehensive famine code had been put in place, which had been there since at least 1880 in one form or the other. बार बार उसमें कुछ चेंजेस मॉडिफिकेशंस किए गए in order to make it more comprehensive. Now, one of the recommendations of the British famine code itself was that there should be automatic suspension of revenue collection in case of crop failure exceeding 50%. किसी भी ऐसे इलाके में जहां पर बिकॉज ऑफ डिफरेंट रीजंस देयर इज अ क्रॉप फेलियर ऑफ 50%, revenue collection should be automatically suspended and the government should start working proactively in order to prevent the situation of a famine from developing, such as supplying the farmers with food and fodder, supplying them seeds, providing water, irrigation equipment, cultivation equipment, credit, etc., so that they could revive agriculture. Okay? However, the British in Kheda were not upholding their own famine code, and this is what Mahatma Gandhi wanted to expose. By drawing national attention to this, he wanted to exert greater pressure upon the. At the same time, he wanted Indians to retain the moral high ground, that we are not going to comply with the illegitimate and immoral British demand for revenue, which according to their own code is illegal. तो हम इसमें participate नहीं करेंगे. It is our moral duty to oppose a payment of revenue. ठीक है. Thirdly, He also wanted to give a chance for the British to accept the Indian demands peacefully without much friction. That is why he did not ask the peasants to immediately become engaged in massive protests or law breaking, etc. He only told them to prepare for a lengthy campaign of civil disobedience. और ये सारी चीजें न्यूज़पेपर में पब्लिश हो रहे हैं. Indians were also reading it, the British were also getting reports. तो ये था इनका स्ट्रैटेजी. आउटकम क्या हुआ? Ultimately, hearing a massive peasant movement in Kheda and the surrounding region of Gujarat, the government issued an internal circular क्या बोला इस सर्कुलर ने? That revenue should be collected only from those who were in a position to pay. ठीक है? No public announcement was made. Simply an internal circular was an internal memo was circulated among the revenue officials. इसको जानबूझ करके अंग्रेजों ने लीक करवा दिया, प्रेस के पास पहुंच गए. तो बिना बोले अंग्रेजों ने कह दिया कि हम बात मानने के लिए तैयार हैं. What did महात्मा गांधी से? नॉन कोऑपरेशन कंटिन्यू करो या कोऑपरेट करने लग जाओ? नहीं, यहां पे बोलेंगे टू कोऑपरेट विद द गवर्नमेंट एंड एंड देयर प्रोग्राम ऑफ नॉन कोऑपरेशन. आई नो कि थोड़ा सरप्राइजिंग लग रहा है, जो अभी तक हमने गांधी जी के बारे में पढ़ा उससे उल्टा लग रहा है, लेकिन ऐसा है नहीं एक्चुअली. सी, Mahatma Gandhi first of all wanted Indians to retain the moral high ground, not only in their own eyes but also in the eyes of the national community as well as the international community. His whole idea was that of Satyagraha, to search and fight for the truth. Internal circular का कंटेंट क्या है कि सबसे कलेक्ट करने की जरूरत नहीं है, but those who are in a position to pay, they should be asked to pay. महात्मा गांधी ने क्या बोला? यस, दिस इज द करेक्ट वर्जन ऑफ द ट्रूथ. इनकी एक्चुअली पोजीशन है रेवेन्यू देने की, उनकी ड्यूटी बनती है देना. ठीक है? तो ही वांटेड moral superiority to for Indians. ठीक है? एक फैक्टर तो ये था बिकॉज ऑफ विच महात्मा गांधी एक्सेप्टेड द ब्रिटिश रिस्पॉन्स. दूसरा फैक्टर क्या था? महात्मा गांधी was still in the early stages of his career, right? So he wanted an outcome which he could market to the populace as a great success. देखो, I forced the British to go on the back foot. The strategy of Satyagraha actually works. ठीक है? तो गांधी जी was interested in obtaining a demonstrable victory. तो एक ऐसी विक्ट्री जिसमें वो खुल करके बोल सके कि यस, सत्याग्रह हैज सक्सीडेड, एंड द आउटकम gave him this kind of victory. Thirdly, late 1918 was a time that the British were trying to win the goodwill of India. थोड़े compromising mood में थे, but this mood is not going to last indefinitely. The British were notorious for their brutal suppression of even the mildest forms of protest. So the British patience was not infinite, and thus Gandhi ji did not want the gains made to be lost suddenly due to British repression. ठीक है, जितना फायदा हुआ है कम से कम उतना आप ले लो. इट इज नो यूज फाइटिंग टुवर्ड्स एन एंड दैट यू नो दैट योर ओपोनेंट इज नॉट गोइंग टू एक्सेप्ट. इसीलिए अंग्रेजों ने इंटरनल मेमो सर्कुलेट किया, ओपनली नहीं बोला, बिकॉज दे ऑल्सो वॉन्टेड टू सेव फेस, एंड गांधी जी wanted to give them a graceful exit. He did not force them to make a public apology. ऐसा कुछ करने के लिए नहीं बोला. He did not hold the revenue officials accountable after this, and that is why he advised the peasants to cooperate with the government. In the end, खेड़ा के फार्मर्स का फायदा हुआ या नहीं हुआ? हुआ. महात्मा गांधी का फायदा हुआ या नहीं हुआ? Was the success of the Satyagraha strategy proven? Yes. That is what Mahatma Gandhi was looking for. Once again, his Kheda Satyagraha was also a major success. Write down issue. Subheading do issue. The farmers at Kheda wanted exemption from land revenue, due to a massive crop failure, emerging from a drought. Full stop. Next point. Revenue officials on the other hand, continued demanding revenue in full, even though their own famine code recommended the automatic suspension of collection during crop failures in excess of 50%. ठीक है. Next subheading, Gandhi's response. Gandhi's response. देखो, he sent Sardar Patel and Indulal Yagnik on a fact-finding mission. Full stop. After meeting the peasants, comma, they reported back validating their problems. Next point, Gandhiji advised the peasants not to cooperate with the revenue officials. Next point, he also asked them to prepare for a lengthy campaign of civil disobedience. Full stop. Next main point लिखो. Gandhiji's strategy was to pressurize the revenue officials. Comma, attract national sympathy for the farmers, and expose the British hypocrisy. Full stop. Simultaneously, he wanted Indians to retain the moral high ground by remaining entirely non-violent and giving an opportunity for the British to accept their demands. Okay? In this way, he wanted to retain the moral high ground for Indians. Clear है इतना? This was Mahatma Gandhi's response. Next लिखो. Outcome. Next subheading, outcome. Write down. Ultimately, the government issued an internal circular. instructing revenue officials to collect revenue only from those peasants who were in a position to pay. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. महात्मा गांधी advised the peasants to resume cooperation with the tax authorities. And call off their protest. Full stop. He did not persist towards a complete victory due to the following reasons. 1, 2 and 3. Number 1, he considered it the moral responsibility of capable farmers to pay their share of the taxes ठीक है. Number 2, he wanted a demonstrable victory that was quickly attained. Number 3, he did not want to test the British patience since it may have resulted in the evaporation of any gains made by the farmers. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. Thus once again Mahatma Gandhi had succeeded in demonstrating the strength of non-violent satyagraha. ठीक है. Finally, the Significance of the three early Gandhian Satyagrahas in India. तो बताइए कि क्या सिग्निफिकेंस आप हाईलाइट कर सकते हैं इनका इन इंडियन हिस्ट्री. First of all, it was the first or early practical expression of Gandhian philosophy in India. And it demonstrated the strength of non-violent सत्याग्रह. ठीक है. In other words, it validated the Gandhian philosophy and methods. People were ready to invest their trust in Mahatma Gandhi and his methods from this point onwards. Gandhi ji was also propelled to the national limelight, making him a true contender for all India leadership of the national movement. Thirdly, the success of the non-violent strategy of Satyagraha had also filled the people of India with enthusiasm. That something that the moderates, extremists and revolutionaries had been trying to attain for the past 40 years was attained so easily by Mahatma Gandhi in a matter of a few months. And this resulted in the enhancement of Gandhi's popularity and the future participation of the masses in the Gandhian movements. ठीक है. Gandhi ji was also able to strike a healthy compromise between the interests of different classes of Indians as well as the nationalist and the government interests. He was always cognizant enough to allow or to give a graceful exit to the British. His strategy was measured in that field, that he did not pressurize the British indefinitely and forced them to respond brutally. Rather, his measured strategy won the confidence of the nationalist leadership as well as the common masses. Further, his strategy of non-violent satyagraha had demonstrated that if Indians remained strictly non-violent, the British would have little practical opportunity to repress them with the use of violence. Thus, he removed the fear of British repression from the minds of ordinary Indians. Gandhiji also demonstrated the ability to transform mundane issues and disputes into a moral, righteous or religious struggle. Okay? His emphasis upon morality and righteousness, his desire to retain the moral high ground for Indians, and the moral justification that he gave for his actions transformed the nature of the mundane issues, that means an industrial dispute or maybe some local economic issues faced by peasants, into a moral, righteous or religious struggle. And this attracted the masses across India towards these local issues, right? He also had the ability to publicize even the smallest of local issues. Okay? And thus he was able to exert greater pressure upon the British to respond. Is this clear? And finally, these three earlier Gandhian Satyagrahas announced the beginning of the Gandhian phase of Indian national movement. Which would ultimately lead India towards independence. Okay? However, he has also been bitterly criticized by colonial and Marxist historians. Gandhi, according to the colonial historians, was nothing more than a shrewd political operator. Right? He was able to play on the emotions of Indians. He was able to transform the mundane secular issues into almost a kind of religious struggle. Okay? So, who used his religious image and spiritual charisma to hijack the national leadership. So they make the allegation that Mahatma Gandhi was never actually interested in bringing relief to Indians against imagined British misrule and oppression. He simply wanted to propel himself to the top of the entire pyramid. And for this, he used his image and spiritual charisma to topple maybe more deserving leaders such as Muhammad Ali Jinnah, etc. The Marxist historians, on the other hand, have leveled the allegation that Mahatma Gandhi deliberately used his image as a miracle worker to transform himself into an ideologue. एक डेमोगॉगिक फिगर में इन्होंने अपने आप को ट्रांसफॉर्म कर लिया एंड दिस reduce the democratic credentials of the national movement. They have leveled the allegation that Gandhi was not the popular choice of the masses, rather he was simply the emotional choice of the masses. He represented their base emotions rather their measured and calculated logic. Okay? So according to the Marxists, the involvement of Mahatma Gandhi in India's politics led to demagoguery, led to the reduction of democracy in India, and also it resulted in the emergence of a situation where apart from Mahatma Gandhi, no other leader was allowed to shine. And this caused resentment and competition, which ultimately led to division, the separatist tendencies, partition, etc. तो उन्होंने एक allegation ये लगाया है. Secondly, they have alleged that Gandhian ideology was never actually meant to serve the interests of the working classes. Was always meant to preserve the bourgeois and landed classes. His ideas of trusteeship and class cooperation were never meant to succeed. Rather, they were simply meant to create the impression of goodwill between the classes so that the real interests of the working classes could never be fulfilled. Same is the case when it comes to the relationship between the upper castes and the lower castes. While Ambedkar advocated for the annihilation of the castes, Gandhi, who was much more conservative in his thinking, advocated for the preservation and reformation of the caste system, whereby untouchability was to be ended. But since untouchability was a byproduct of the caste system, वो caste system कभी भी untouchability को fully reject करेगा? नहीं करेगा. This is what the Marxists are alleging. And thus, Gandhian ideology, instead of driving India towards progress, led India towards or decelerated progress. Resulting in the emergence of an India which was neither as equal as it could have been nor as equitable as it could have been. ठीक है? On the other hand, हमें इस क्रिटिसिज्म को भी आंसर करने की जरूरत है. Colonial and Marxist historians first of all cannot be expected to be objective regarding Mahatma Gandhi. They had an inherent bias against Mahatma Gandhi. Colonial historians were biased because Mahatma Gandhi represented the nation as a whole and he led the national movement right to independence. He also defined the moral convictions by which India would define itself in the future. And since the colonial historians denied the concept of Indian nationalism as a whole, it was natural for them to undermine the role played by Mahatma Gandhi. वो इसलिए biased है. Marxist historians इसलिए biased हैं against Mahatma Gandhi because the very basis of Marxist historiography is the idea of class struggle, class conflict. Mahatma Gandhi had led a campaign against this ideology of class conflict. He had given another solution to resolve the class situation, that is class cooperation. So Marxists were ideologically opposed to him. तो Marxist dogma से Gandhian ideology मैच नहीं करता था इसलिए. Secondly, as far as the colonial allegation that Gandhi ji was never actually interested in the welfare of Indians, he was simply interested in a high level political game which would allow him to propel himself to the top of the nationalist leadership. We can simply say that effective leadership requires cohesion and unity of action. ठीक है? For Mahatma Gandhi to become a good mass leader, he had to first position himself to lead the masses. if that involved Mahatma Gandhi climbing to the top of the nationalist pyramid, nationalist ladder, so that was in the end beneficial for the national movement as a whole, because it was under his guidance that the Indian nationalists made the greatest gains. Okay? In other words, we can say that to be a good leader, Gandhi ji needed to put himself in a position of leadership. Secondly, the greatest gains were made under him. And thus, the allegation that he was never actually interested in the welfare of Indians, the national movement or national interests, that is patently invalid. Regarding the Marxist allegation that Gandhian ways resulted in the permanent association of Indian politics with demagoguery, we can say that first of all, Gandhi is regarded as one of the most prominent global leaders of not only the 20th century but probably all of human history. And this assessment is not uniquely Indian. Many historians and scholars from across the globe subscribe to this opinion. Gandhi is regarded as one of the greatest leaders of human history. And आप क्या मोर को उसकी खूबसूरती के लिए क्रिटिसाइज कर सकते हो? नहीं. हिमालय को उसकी ऊंचाई के लिए क्रिटिसाइज कर सकते हो, सर को उसकी गहराई के लिए क्रिटिसाइज कर सकते हो. गांधी को उनके जीनियस के लिए क्यों क्रिटिसाइज कर रहे? दैट इज नॉट अ रियल एलिगेशन. सेकेंडली, महात्मा गांधी नेवर हिमसेल्फ कॉल्ड हिमसेल्फ महात्मा, या फिर उन्होंने कभी ये नहीं बोला दैट मैं बहुत चमत्कारी हूं, मेरे हाथ में जादू है. इट वॉज सिंपली द पीपल हु स्टार्टेड बिलीविंग दीज. एंड उसमें गलती किसकी है? Is it Mahatma Gandhi's fault or is it the fault of the British who in 200 long years of their rule in India were unable to amply educate the masses, were unable to overcome the natural superstitions which affected Indians? अंग्रेजों की गलती है. ठीक है. तो गांधी जी never personally engaged in demagoguery. ठीक है. Rather, it was the superstitious Indian masses who ascribed supernatural abilities upon him. लेकिन जो मार्क्सिस्ट बोल रहे हैं ना कहीं ना कहीं थोड़ा बहुत छुपा हुआ है. महात्मा गांधी ने खुद कभी नहीं बोला कि मैं बहुत चमत्कारी बाबा हूं, चमत्कार करके देश को आजाद करवा दूंगा, लेकिन जब लोगों ने ऐसा बोला उनके बारे में तो कभी उन्होंने करेक्ट करने की कोशिश नहीं। ठीक है, तो थोड़ा बहुत ट्रूथ छुपा हुआ है, लेकिन गांधी जी को इस तरह से क्रिटिसाइज भी नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि उनका एक्चुअली इसमें कोई फॉल्ट वाज नॉट पर्सनली रिस्पॉन्सिबल। एंड लास्टली वी कैन से दैट history has taught us some very valuable lessons, right? तो जो मार्क्सिस्ट आइडियोलॉजी है, इज इट अ फ्लॉलेस आइडियोलॉजी? नो। क्यों? ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दिस आइडियोलॉजी जगह जगह पर ब्लड रेवोल्यूशंस हुए, एंड कहीं पे वो जो मार्क्सिस्ट यूटोपिया वाला फाइनल स्टेज है, कम्युनिज्म वाला, वो एक्चुअली अटेन हुआ है अ क्लासलेस और स्टेटलेस सोसाइटी? नो, इट हैज सिंपली been a recipe for the concentration of power, has simply left a legacy of pain, failure, inequality and absolutism. So it has failed demonstrably on several fronts, right? तो महात्मा गांधी को क्रिटिसाइज करना चाहिए इस आइडियोलॉजी को एक्सेप्ट ना करने के लिए, या उनको प्रेज करना चाहिए? प्रेज करना चाहिए, राइट? तो व्हाइल राइटिंग योर आंसर्स ना, यू हैव टू बी समवॉट ऑफ अ लॉयर, कि जो बिटरेस्ट क्रिटिसिज्म है वो आपको दोबारा से नई लाइट में परसीव करने की एबिलिटी डेवलप कर। इन दिस लाइट Gandhi's search for a new ideology seems to have been the wiser choice. ठीक है, so on the whole we can say that the three early Gandhian Satyagrahas proved to be the first, or proved to be the foundation of Gandhian mass politics that redefined Indian nationalism and propelled India towards independence. Propelled India towards independence. ठीक है, अब नेशनल मूवमेंट को नए लीडर मिल गए थे, नेशनल मूवमेंट को नया विजन मिल गया था, नई स्ट्रैटेजी मिल गई थी और नए मेथड्स मिल गए थे. Had also become more inclusive in nature. It had been transformed from simply a political struggle into a moral, righteous and religious struggle. Okay? So this is what we are saying, that foundation of Gandhian mass politics were laid by these three early satyagrahas, which ultimately propelled India towards independence. Okay? Take down a question. throw light on the entry of Gandhi into nationalist politics. Full stop. Discuss the significance of his three early Satyagrahas. पहला जो पोर्शन है, थ्रो लाइट ऑन द एंट्री ऑफ महात्मा गांधी इनटू नेशनलिस्ट पॉलिटिक्स, यू हैव टू प्रोवाइड अ ब्रीफ बैकग्राउंड ऑफ द थ्री अर्ली सत्याग्रहs. ब्रीफली आप उनके इश्यूज को मेंशन करोगे, गांधी जी की को मेंशन करोगे और रिस्पॉन्स को मेंशन, राइट. देन यू हैव टू कम टू द सेकंड पोर्शन, सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ दीज थ्री अर्ली सत्याग्रहs. तो जो ये 7-8 पॉइंट्स हमने लिखे हुए हैं, दीज 8 पॉइंट्स दैट यू विल हैव टू फिल इट. हो जाएगा ये, ठीक है. एनी डाउट्स? नहीं. Abhiram, any doubts? No? All right then. Thank you for your time. कल मिलते हैं. We are going to look at the developments during the post-war phase. पहला टॉपिक हमें कवर करना है rising post-war discontent. तो क्या फैक्टर्स थे उसके पीछे, and what was the result, that will be covering. Right? चलिए then. Thank you for your time. See you guys tomorrow.